So now I'll start again by saying we do have a quorum present, and I'll turn it over to the chair.
And again, thank you and good morning for attending today's meeting. This is, I guess, would be more of the second or third meeting where we're bringing everyone together. So we first still wanted to start off just with introductions, just until we kind of get to know everyone. So if you could just start, I'll start, but just say your name and the agency that you're representing or whom you're representing. So my name is Anjali McGugan. I am a supervisor here with DDS or with RSA. And I am the SRC chairperson.
Next door versus
what?
Next building
What?
or something like that.
And then
Can people put their,
which is a weird
put it
thing.
on mute, please? Thank you.
I'm Sandy Bernstein from Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. I'm filling in for Chloe Peoples, who's our main CAP attorney, but she's on maternity leave until the end of May.
Thank you for filling in for her, Sandy, and showing up for us today.
Sure, I'm gonna put you on mute so you don't hear the wind.
Hi, Michelle Johnson, Aussie Dom family. Good morning.
Hi, Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cedric Rivers. I work in hospitality. I work at the JW Marriott here in downtown DC. I'm the Director of Human Resources Operations.
Good morning, Cedric.
Good morning.
Morning. I am Susan Brooks with RCM of Washington, a provider here in the district.
Good morning, Susan.
Hi, good morning. This is Allison White with the DC Developmental Disabilities Council.
Hi, Allison. Good morning.
Good morning, this is Andy Reese. I'm the director of DDS. I think did we get Riola yet, or are you still having audio issues?
Can you hear me? You
Sure
can.
can.
Okay, great. I got it fixed. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Riola DeRico. I'm a volunteer from Ward 8.
And so good morning again, everyone. So today there's just a couple items on our agenda for this morning. And one of them being committee updates, which we may not have any updates at this moment because I'm sure the committees have not met. And then we also want to take some time to look at the state plans and goals, our state plan goals and priorities. Andy has taken a liberty to update those, so we will review what has been updated. And then if you have any questions, we can further go into that. And then Andy will also provide some updates as being the director for DDS, as well as RSA. And then if you have any other items that to discuss, we can also add those to the agenda. So last time that we met, we discussed the committees and we kind of assigned chairs. The request or the ask was that everyone on the committee or on the council participate in a committee. And so just based on the notes, I did combine and compile the notes and the results from last week, or I'm sorry, the last meeting. And so I'll review what we have and who volunteered for what. And then I'll also take some time to just share what each of these committees have the responsibility of doing. And it's our hope that by the next time we have our SRC meeting, that each committee would have met and at least kind of started on the track of discussing and talking amongst committee members to ensure that we are, trying to get to the point of having these regularly and starting to have some actions completed and things of those sorts. So for the SRC committees, what we do have, we have 4 committees that are outlined by our bylaws. And those being the Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy Committee, the Media and Public Awareness Committee, the Policy Planning and Review Committee, as well as the Nominating Committee. So I'll start with the Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy Committee, which Ms. Brooks, Susan Brooks, has volunteered to chair. We do need more participants on this committee because it would just be Susan right now. So once I read this, if there's any interest in joining this committee, you can let us know, or you can email myself or Andy later, and we can definitely add you to the committee. So the Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy Committee, some of the items or things that they're responsible for is developing a method to determine the degree of RSA clients' satisfaction with the quality of RSA services in other District of Columbia programs and agencies, such as the Client Assistant Program, and other programs or agencies that affect or potentially affect the abilities of individuals with disabilities in achieving rehabilitation goals and objectives under Title I of the Act. This committee is also responsible for conducting an annual operations audit of RSA service delivery to determine the value and effectiveness of RSA programs, its contractor and guarantees to ensure compliance with the 1992 amendments of the Act and the ADA affecting the employment outcome of RSA clients. And the other responsibility is to develop and make recommendations and submit them to the Policy Planning and Review Committee to use in the annual reports. And I'll send this to you, Susan, separately, so you have an idea of what it is that you would be responsible for kind of spearheading or even collecting some members to kind of help you out. So for the Media and Public Awareness Committee, I have Ms. Deborah Russell as the chairperson, which she's not on the call today.
She had a conflict.
Okay, so she had a conflict. And then Lucas has, and Lucas is not here as well. Lucas has requested to join, and Susan, I also have you down to kind of assist with this committee as well. So for the Media and Public Awareness Committee, this committee develops programs, trainings, and other activities for people with disabilities and their family members that will increase public awareness and knowledge of rehabilitation services, maintain high visibility of RSA services and the council. This committee also develops and makes recommendations and submits them to the Policy Planning and Review Committee for use in the annual report. Again, if you're interested in that, you can let me know during this meeting, or we can talk about this, or you can email me later. The third committee we have is the Policy Planning and Review Committee. This committee is chaired by Chloe Peoples. I'm going to put Sandy for now until Chloe returns. And then also Lucas is involved with assisting on this committee. And so this committee is responsible for reviewing and evaluating the RSA state plan, the strategic plan, and coordinate the recommendations provided by the standing committees for use in the annual report. This committee also coordinates with other councils as set forth in Article 5, Section 5 of these bylaws to promote, or of the bylaws to promote the development of unified strategies and activities which will ensure the dignity, empowerment, and quality of life for people with disabilities. And lastly, we have the Nominating Committee, which is chaired by Allison White. And this committee develops a method of elections of officers and balloting at least 60 days prior to the election of officers, consistent with articles of these bylaws. And so those are our 4 committees. Hopefully for those that just have chairs on them, until we have I guess, a full committee, I'm also willing to help in kind of getting some of the discussion going. If you're not on a committee, we ask that you do join one so that we can get things going and we actually have a full committee of various individuals. So let's see, I was listed on the consumer with Susan, Maya, and Berta for Andy's. Okay. So I will add, for Riola, I will add you. Hold on one moment, Maya. Berta. Okay, so Susan, that is your committee. So you will have assistance from Riola, Maya, and Berta. Okay. All right. Any other questions? So it's all, so Susan is also saying that Riola is listed as the chair for which committee, Susan?
So Andy, and perhaps it has changed, but Andy sent out a email on January 10th, kind of listing out each of the committees, and I was listed on the Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy Committee, but Miss Riola was listed as the chairperson. I don't, if things have changed, that's totally fine, but I just don't want to overstep when if there's already been someone identified.
No, I would say that you two can maybe discuss it amongst, since you guys are on the committee. I'm fine with whomever would like to, to chair that.
No one in this room changed anything.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm fine with whatever, when you all meet, if the four of you guys want to discuss who wants to be the chair, I think that's fine, and you can just report back and confirm. And then, so Cedric, did you have any interest in any of the chairs? I think on the list today, you're the only one that I don't have. Sorry to put you on the spot, but you're the only one that I don't have listed.
you mean on committees?
Yes, yes, listed as a committee member or participant.
The policy committee is
Yes.
cool.
I am on one of the committees. I'm on the Media and Public Awareness Committee with Deborah Russell and Jay Mitchell Johnson.
Okay, thank you. And Sandy, you were saying?
No, I was just trying to, if he wasn't on a committee, trying to give a push for my committee.
I'm good with myself. I'm gonna join that too, just so I can be involved too, so.
Oh, great.
But if there's someone else that's not, I guess, a member of CAP and or a employee of RSA, that would be helpful to have some other insightful input outside of those, of the people that are listed on the policy planning committee. It would be nice to have more of a, I guess, well-rounded reflection of that from our group that's listed or that's a part of our council. And I'll also reach out to individuals that aren't here to try to see if I can pull some people to join. So I will, again, I'll update the list that I have as well as send out the duties of the standing committees so that you have them at your disposal I'll send them to all the chairs. And I'll also add the contact information so the chairs know how to contact. And again, we're just asking that committees plan to meet between now and our next meeting. And if there's no further questions, we'll move on to reviewing the state plan goals and priorities and receive our update on that.
Okay, so we did have a meeting, sort of subcommittee meeting or ad hoc committee meeting of people to discuss the goals and priorities so that we could take a look at our goals and priorities consistent with the comprehensive statewide needs assessment that was just published in September. Following our review of, or my review, the internal review at DDS of the needs assessment, some areas that stood out to us that we needed to address in our goals and priorities included looking at our rate of employment, improving our numbers of successful outcomes, more direct and frequent contact with consumers, engaging people across all boards, broadening our skills assessment of new people who apply for services, improving our outreach, our staff development, communication, taking a look at our processes, including having some task force on process improvement, eligibility, referral, client participation, engagement and retention, and overall service delivery, a more robust annual satisfaction survey, making sure that we're providing financial literacy, benefits counseling, disability awareness for the American Job Center staff, and better collaboration within the workforce system, and better coordination with the Summer Youth Employment Program. So considering those kind of takeaways that we had from the needs assessment, I'm going to walk through, and this will be the only thing that comes to mind is a slow, somewhat tedious walk through our 4 goals and associated strategies and performance measures that we're proposing at this time for our amended state plan. And so our first goal would be to increase the number of DC residents with disabilities who achieve quality employment outcomes in competitive integrated settings. And there are a number of objectives in order to accomplish this. The first is to increase outreach efforts with a particular focus on ensuring accessibility of services for people identified as unserved or underserved in our comprehensive statewide needs assessment. And our strategies for this are to maintain an increased presence of bilingual Spanish-speaking staff, to maintain a sustainable presence of VR specialists at all 3 American Job Centers, 5 days a week, and to ensure that we have employment coordinators at the AJCs in Wards 7 and 8. Ensure that we are offering intake appointments at either our office here, one of the AJC locations, or a community-based location whenever new people call for an intake. Identify additional outreach sites in order to expand our presence across all wards of the district. Identify outreach sites and community-based organizations that serve immigrants from Asia, Pacific Islands, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Latin America, and for people with physical and sensory disabilities. So to measure our success in these areas, we have a number of things that we'll be tracking. We'll maintain sufficient staff fluent in Spanish to assign a Spanish-speaking specialist to all limited English proficient or non-English proficient Spanish-speaking clients, consistent with the caseload standards in our state plan. Services will be provided 5 days a week at the AJCs. When scheduling intake, DCRA staff will always offer an appointment at a location in the community most accessible to a client's home. DCRSA will expand its outreach and engagement to at least 3 additional agencies based in Wards 7 and 8, and will establish an agreement to provide services at each location at least once a month. We will reestablish our MOA with the National Rehabilitation Hospital. We will expand outreach and engagement to at least 2 community-based agencies serving Ethiopian and Eritrean immigrants, 2 serving immigrants from Latin America, and we will establish an agreement to provide services at each location at least 1 day per month. We will sponsor education and informational activities in underserved and unserved communities, develop and maintain flyers, brochures, and other printed materials in diverse languages, And we will expand outreach and engagement to medical facilities that specialize with people with physical and sensory disabilities, and establish an agreement to provide services there at least 1 day per month. So that's objective 1.1. And I guess as I go, if people have questions, just cut in. You know, you can raise your hand if you wish, but I'm also looking at my screen, so you can also just speak up. There's not that many of us here. Our next objective is to increase the effectiveness of outreach efforts through ongoing evaluation of the utilization of our outreach sites. And in order to do this, our strategies are to assign VR supervisory staff to each quadrant of the city to be responsible for managing the relationship between RSA and the community-based agencies where the services are offered. Track the number of referrals received and clients seen at each outreach site monthly. Work with site active staff to determine what marketing can be done to improve outreach, and consider reducing or eliminating services in sites that appear to be underutilized. And we'll measure this by the VR supervisory staff will conduct an annual review of the community sites in the wards they're responsible for to evaluate the utilization. And RSA will increase outreach sites in the community to at least 50% of the level that existed prior to the COVID public health emergency, which was 37 in 2018, by June 2026, and to at least 75% of this level by June 2027, and back up to 100% of this level by June 2028. Our next objective, I think there's like 7 in this section, so bear with me, is, and this is kind of the most important, which is to improve our employment outcomes. So that's why we have so many various objectives to achieve this. The next is to increase the number of people who complete training programs that prepare them for jobs in high demand fields, increasing the number of employment placements in these fields. Our strategies to accomplish this are to coordinate with the DC WIC staff and the Department of Employment staff responsible for approving and contracting with eligible training providers to identify qualified providers in the identified growth industries in DC. Provide training to VR specialists to ensure that they can use labor market information in assisting people to develop employment goals that are consistent with the person's strengths, needs, resources, abilities, capabilities, and that they prepare the person for work that's available in high demand fields in the DC economy. Track the number of people completing training programs in high demand fields. Analyze employment rates for those completing training in high demand fields by training provider and by employment field. Evaluate provider performance annually, including completion rates, employment rates, and consumer satisfaction, and make this information publicly available. And we'll measure our performance in this area by obtaining baseline data regarding performance outcomes for all current hospitality, healthcare, IT, construction, and security training providers with which we have agreements. There will be an increase in the number of people served by RSA who complete training programs in identified high demand industries. There will be an increase in the number of people served who complete training. We said the same thing twice. That's why it's helpful to read out loud sometimes. And there will be an increase in job placements in high demand industries. Did I say it 3 times? No, the next time is not only will they complete the training, but they will also get a job. Our next objective in this area is to increase the number of people with intellectual disabilities and serious mental illness or substance use disorders who obtain and maintain employment through better coordination of supported employment services with DDS's own Developmental Disabilities Administration and the Department of Behavioral Health. Our strategies here are to arrange with DBH to provide training for all VR specialists regarding mental health and substance use treatment services available in DC. Assign 3 VR counselors to work with people referred from DDA and 3 counselors to work with people referred from DBH. Arrange with DBH to provide training for all VR specialists regarding mental health and substance use treatment services available in the district. And we'll measure our performance in this area by the following. We expect there will be at least 25 successful closures for people referred for employment from DDA. There will be at least 50 successful closures for people referred from DBH. There will be no gaps in the provision of supported employment services when transitioning people from VR supported employment to extended supported employment services. And all people in transition, that's not high school transition, but in transition from supported employment to extended services, will receive 90 days of extended services from RSA before their case is successfully closed. They'll get 90 days of extended services in the from the extended service provider before RSA closes their case to ensure that that there is no gap in services. Our next objective is to increase the range of employment outcomes, kind of a perennial issue, frankly. Provide person-centered training for VR specialists and training on the provision of comprehensive holistic assessment for use in eligibility determination and for the comprehensive assessment used to inform development of the IPE. Conduct the ECASAS assessment at the time of a person's application and provide referrals for appropriate literacy and adult education services. Establish a working group within RSA, including line staff and managers, in coordination with DDS's Quality Assurance and Performance Management Administration, the performance unit, focused on improving processes such as eligibility, referral, client participation, engagement, retention, and service delivery. Expand the provision of job readiness training for RSA job seekers by both our business relations and employment coordinator staff and through contracts with provider agencies. Provide training for VR counselors to strengthen assessment and counseling skills utilized during IPE development to ensure that counselors are fully taking into account the person's strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, career interests, and informed choice in supporting the person to establish an employment goal. And we will measure our performance in this area by, this first one doesn't sound like measuring performance, but I'll read it and we'll consider. Providing training on customized employment and employer engagement for VR and provider staff to increase the capability. This sounds to me, frankly, I'll read it again. I kept reading. And this sounds to me more like a strategy than a performance measure, which is provide training on customized employment and employer engagement for VR and provider agency staff, and provide training sessions to increase capability of DCRSA and providers, and to provide this on an ongoing basis. That sounds to me more like a strategy.
I agree.
And the performance metric might be something like how many of those we'll do.
Yeah.
Review, update, and publish benefits counseling procedures to ensure streamlined access to this service. Increase the number of people who complete the ECASAS assessment by 10% above the current number. Increase the number of people who receive job readiness training by 10% above the current number. All VR staff will use person-centered planning tools to develop employment goals that better reflect strengths, interests, abilities, capabilities, and resources of people served by RSA, maintain the increased level of people who receive job readiness training, and ensure that all VR clients receiving SSI or SSDI benefits are offered to attend RSA's benefits counseling and orientation sessions immediately after eligibility is determined. Our second goal is to improve RSA service delivery through more efficient operations and a more effective skilled workforce. Our first objective is to provide regular training to DC RSA staff. And our strategies here are to provide regular mandatory training for VR staff based on policies, procedures, protocols, best practices, and trends identified by the agency, and make these trainings available electronically. Improve the RSA onboarding process to efficiently and effectively educate new staff about job requirements. Implement a mentoring program for new staff to shadow and receive guidance from experienced colleagues. Coordinate with DDS Office of Human Capital to hire a qualified full-time CRC qualified vocational rehabilitation trainer who will be responsible for overseeing onboarding new staff, training, and ongoing staff development. Provide support to staff who are not currently eligible to sit for the CRC examination, consistent with the provisions in the Comprehensive System of Personnel Development. I don't like the language in that one. I'm gonna leave it this, I'm not leaving the language the same in the end, but I'm gonna move it around a little, but we are going to, and we need to include in our state plan that we provide support for people to do the CRC, because that allows us to use VR grant funds to pay for it. And we want to do that. So, and we'll measure our performance here by reviewing the results from the quality case review system and other quality assurance reviews, and that this will show at least 90% compliance with new policies and procedures, or the agency will provide updated training to improve outcomes. In program year 24 to 28, RSA will track WIOA performance measures to establish a baseline of performance, and actually this should say 25 to 28. A baseline of performance by June 30, 2028, RSA will meet established WIOA performance standards identified in the Unified State Workforce Development Plan. Our next objective is to retain, train, and recruit experienced qualified VR staff and service providers to improve services to low incidence populations, including people who are blind, deafblind, have autism or other autism spectrum disorders. And our strategies for this are to provide continuous training to staff on customized employment policies, procedures, protocols, and best practices. Provide continuous training to service providers on customized employment. Develop and implement outreach plans to recruit providers who can provide services to low incidence populations. Develop and implement an outreach plan on DCRSA services to low incidence populations. Establish a working group within RSA focused on improving processes such as eligibility referral, the one referred to above. We'll measure our performance here by 100% of the workforce will receive the professional development opportunities. VR specialist performance will be 90% compliance in case reviews. We will establish and maintain a communication network with service providers. DCRSA will complete the development and use of the vendor report card system to include the work groups with the SRC and the provider community. DCRSA will recruit CVE providers for services to include the blind and deaf, especially job placement and supported employment. Invite providers to be part of trainings provided to staff and relevant to the provider community. Establish contracts that support consumers achieving milestones contained in the common performance measures in WIOA to include payment for consumers that retain employment during the second and fourth quarter after exit from the VR program. RSA will provide ongoing training to staff on human care agreements, including the payment structure for job development and placement. Once again, sounds like a strategy. Our next objective in this area is to revise VR policies and procedures to ensure that current policies are consistent with the requirements of WIOA. Consult with, and our strategies here are to consult with the SRC regarding the review of all current policies and procedures and revise as necessary. Upon review of the final federal WIOA rules, update as necessary. The district regulate. This is old. I'm thinking that we do not, I don't believe, but I will say, maybe I can leave it to the policy committee. I don't think there's any need to review our regulations to make sure they're consistent with WIOA because they have been updated since then. But Sandy, you can get back to me on that. I think that we're fine on the regulations, but we do need to do a review of the policies.
Yeah, I can get back. I was just gonna say, I know we have some issues with the policies. I don't know about the regulations. I'm off the metro, by the way.
I think we're good on the regulations, but yes. Hold required public hearings and provide appropriate public notice to obtain community input on all policy, procedure, and regulatory changes. And performance by June 30, 2028. VR, this says regulations. I'm going to say policies, or maybe I'll say regulations and policies. Regulations, policies, and procedures will be consistent with all requirements in WIOA. And then it says, have up-to-date policies and procedures consistent with the federal and district regulations, which reflect best practices and are developed with input from the Actually, I think that we can remove the one and just have performance by June 30, 2026 and ongoing through, actually it should be performance by June 30, 2028, just to be, as I said in the hearing the other day, change sometimes takes longer than we anticipate. So by June 30, 2028, we will have up-to-date policies and procedures consistent with federal and district regulations, which reflect best practices. We should say are consistent with well, if it's federal regulations, consistent with WIOA, and are developed with input from the SRC and the community. Our third goal is related to transition, expand and improve the quality of transition services to improve coordination with the state education and all local education agencies, and implementation of pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities. Our first objective here is to establish and maintain an MOA. I'm going to say maintain because we have one. Oh, no, we don't, because it's got LEAs too. Sorry, reading ahead of myself. I shouldn't do that. DCRSA will establish and maintain MOAs, memoranda of agreements, with the Office of the State Superintendent and all local education agencies, including DCPS and all public charter schools regarding the provision of services to all students with disabilities, including those who are potentially eligible for VR. And we will work with OSSI and the local education agencies to clarify updates and processes for referrals to RSA, provide training to school staff regarding when referral for VR service is appropriate, and transition planning should begin. I just noticed that like objective and strategies are all mixed into one there, so I'm just gonna leave a note here for someone to fix that. And we'll measure this by, we will have MOAs with all 18 public charter schools. The MOA with DCPS and OSSI will be reviewed annually and updated as necessary. When appropriate, all students attending a DC public school, public charter school, or non-public placement will be referred for participation in pre-employment transition services beginning at age 14 with the consent of the adult student or parent of students under the age of 18. DCRSA will determine eligibility for VR services within 60 days of receiving an application and complete the IPE within 90 days of determining eligibility. VR counselors will visit the schools regularly on at least a monthly basis or more frequently for schools that have higher referral numbers. Transition VR specialists are available to see students to complete applications, determine eligibility, complete comprehensive assessments, and develop IPE, provide ongoing counseling and guidance, provide regarding pre-employment transition services. Sorry, I'm making notes as I go. This paragraph includes more than one strategy, so they need to be listed. Our next objective, provide opportunities for work experience for students with disability, resulting in post-secondary education or competitive integrated employment outcomes. RSA will provide at least 140 paid work-based learning experiences annually for DC public students who are enrolled in CTE or transition courses aligned to the goals for competitive integrated employment or their post-secondary education interest. Each summer, at least 25 eligible students will participate in pre-ETS employment summer work-based learning experience, Jumpstart. RSA Employment Coordinator will work with employers to provide paid work-based learning experience for at least 65 students who attend DC public charter schools. RSA will work with LEAs and employer partners to ensure that at least 25 students who participated in an RSA-funded work-based learning experience achieve competitive integrated employment or post-secondary education or training following the conclusion of work-based learning experience or secondary education. Coordinate with schools to offer benefits counseling for eligible or potentially eligible students through pre-employment transition services as appropriate. Continue to work with DOES to coordinate and provide necessary supports to identify students who are eligible or potentially eligible for VR services to be successful in their summer youth, Marion-Barry Summer Youth Employment, summer work placements. The Jumpstart program provides support to students with most with most significant disabilities, including a pre-employment boot camp. Okay, this is like a continue the Jumpstart program that provides support to students with most significant disabilities, including pre-employment boot camp, job readiness training, travel training, and any additional services needed to support these youth. Ensure that all students on a certificate pathway have at least one opportunity for paid work-based learning experience prior to exiting high school. Prior to exiting high school, all students on a certificate pathway who are referred to RSA for either pre-EPS or VR services will have the opportunity to work with RSA on resume development, which may include prior employment or work-based learning experiences. Provide communication to transition youth using social media platforms that are familiar to this population. The employment coordinator will work with employers to provide paid work-based learning experience for at least 25 students who are enrolled in non-public schools. And this will be measured through, the measurement is that by June 30, 2026, and ongoing through June 30, 2028, RSA will provide at least 140 paid work-based learning experiences annually for DCPS students enrolled in CTE or transition courses. At least 25 eligible students will participate in a supported employment summer work-based learning experience. RSA will coordinate with pre-EPS providers to establish paid work-based learning for at least 65 students who attend public charter schools. Work with LEAs and employer partners to ensure at least 25 students who participate in RSA-funded work-based learning experience achieve competitive integrated employment or post-secondary education or training following the conclusion of work-based learning experience or secondary education. Coordinate with schools to offer benefits counseling for eligible students. That's not a I'd like to hear a number under the performance metric, which is how many we would do to consider ourselves successful. Continue to work with DOES to coordinate and provide necessary supports to identify students eligible or potentially eligible. Ensure that all students on a certificate pathway have at least one opportunity for paid work-based experience prior to exiting school. All students on a certificate pathway are referred for either pre-employment transition services or VR services will have an opportunity to work on resume development. I feel like we've said that before. The next objective in transition is to provide pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities that lead to post-secondary education or competitive integrated employment. Our strategies are to have VR specialists and transition specialists provide monthly job readiness training sessions in local education agencies for students with disabilities who are potentially eligible for VR services. As needed, issue a solicitation seeking providers to provide pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities. Okay. RSA will work with DCPS and public charter schools to track students who have 504 plans and identify other students with disabilities who may be potentially eligible for VR services. Coordinate with pre-ETS providers to host community-based transition fairs where DCPS and public charter school students can explore career pathways, post-secondary education opportunities, and participate in work readiness activities. Coordinate with DCPS and public charter schools to host school-based transition fairs to increase the number of students accessing pre-employment transition services. The transition program manager will participate in and attend OSSI's quarterly career technical education special populations advisory committee to provide input on and evaluate strategies to strengthen the provision of CTE for students with disabilities. And the performance here is that at least 75% of students with IEPs and 504 plans will receive at least one pre-employment transition service during the 25-26 school year. That should say 26-27 school year, because as you recall, this is the amended goals that will go into effect that are going to be submitted in July. So
Can I ask why it's 75% and not higher? That's like a C, right?
oh my gosh, no. When you compare that number to the percentage from what we hear across the country of students that they're able to reach, they think that is overly optimistic. So
Does that mean you're
You would-
offering it to 100% of the people, but you're thinking that only 75% will take a service?
exactly.
Okay.
They are present in the school all the time, but you have one big challenge, which is the school can't just refer kids to us. They have to have the consent of the parent because they're disclosing that it's a student with a disability. So you either have to have the parents or the adult students consent before you refer them to us. What we've been pushing for and haven't been successful yet is to have a consent and referral stuck in all those papers that students take home at the beginning of the school year, because we think when you sign for, to get your free lunch, that you'll also sign the other thing that says, oh, go ahead and give me that other thing too. But we've done lots of outreach to encourage more people to come. We pay for food. We do like a lunch every month at all the different schools to invite kids to that. But realistically, getting up to 75% has been quite a heavy lift.
Got it. That
We
makes
have
sense.
So, and I'm wrong, it is the 25-26 school year because we're in 25, so. VR specialists and transition specialists work with DCPS, public charter and non-public schools to coordinate at least 15 school-based transition fairs. We'll coordinate with pre-ETS providers to host at least 2 community-based transition fairs and work with OSSI, CRE. I don't know what that is supposed to stand for. It may be CTE, I don't know. Special Population Committee to identify strategies that lead to increased CTE enrollment. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be a T. And participation rates among students with disabilities. So the career technical education, quite frankly, in the school system, it has been a challenge. And so having it as a goal to really be focused on ensuring that those programs are accessible to students with disabilities is very important. You will often get pushback from schools saying, well, it's too hard to fit that into their schedule because, the special ed classes they go to are not flexible and therefore they don't have the flexibility to participate in the CTE program. So we have been working and continue to work with OSSI, DCPS to make sure that students with disabilities have the same opportunities there. Our final goal is to improve the coordination with other workforce development agencies providing services at the American Job Centers. The objective 1 is to improve coordination of services at the AJC. And RSA's strategies here will be to work with DOES, the WIC, the The AJC, the workforce operator, should provide cross-training for staff at the AJCs and request cross-training from the one-stop operator and DOES for all VR staff that are located at the AJCs. And the second strategy is in coordination with the Office of Disability Rights, provide an evaluation of accessibility of all AJCs to the one-stop operator and provide technical assistance to support them in making any necessary changes to ensure that all AJCs are accessible for people with disabilities, including people with physical and sensory impairments. The performance here is that American Job Centers will be accessible and provide all required core services. The next objective is improve coordination of services to businesses. RSA will coordinate with the Business Services Group at the Department of Employment Services to ensure that business outreach by government agencies occurs in a more coordinated manner. Establish a relationship with the Department of Small Local Business Development, DSLBD, and with small local businesses in DC to inform them about supports available for employees with disabilities. Provide business roundtables regularly throughout the year to provide education to businesses about employing people with disabilities. Work with business partners to conduct business roundtables and develop education materials for business. And the performance metrics will be that RSA will have at least 2 business roundtables each year. RSA will increase the number of small businesses with which it has relationships by 10% annually. And that's everything. So this is like the beginning of this process. And so what comes next is we will be doing this overview, providing this to our VR supervisory staff, and then we'll do it in a VR all hands meeting, and then we will do it in the in a quarterly provider meeting, which have not been happening, but we'll be scheduling. And we'll be getting our quarterly RSA provider meetings back on track, and this will be on the agenda.
And then in the community forum.
And then we'll do it at the community forum. I'm expecting in April. And then we will come back together with all the input that we got from that at our next SRC meeting. So we'll be in very good shape to have something near final easily by June so that we can submit it to the Department of Education. Any thoughts about all of that? It's a bit overwhelming, I think. But a lot of, I think the most important piece in it is figuring out ways to keep it in front of us all the time. Because as you go through it, they're really important things for us to do. And you know, as I read one of these, I can just tell you, coordinate with the Business Services Group at DOES to ensure that business outreach by government agencies occurs in a more coordinated manner. I went to a WIC meeting a couple months ago, and one of the issues that someone raised was they talk to businesses, and the biggest concern from businesses is, I hear from all of you. Like, I have an opening and 6 different people come in and want me to hire their person. And can't you all coordinate so that just one person comes to me, provides the opportunity to all of you? And so they said, that's why we're coordinating this group, and that's what we're going to do. And I raised my hand, and I had not been at WIC meetings for quite some time. And I said, you know, I feel like I just got home at 3 in the afternoon and turned on General Hospital, and I recognized every character and knew all the show from when I used to watch it 40 years ago. Because I can tell you that what you just said is what we have been saying at the WIC since at least 2013. And it is an area that we really need to address. And that's why I say it's so important that we figure out a way and we'll be working with Quatma's Performance Management Unit, that we figure out a way to keep all of these in front of us so that we're actually really working on all of this, so that we really do improve our outcomes, because I do think there's some good solid stuff in here. But it's a plan that needs to be implemented, not just written and submitted for approval to Department of Education or to RSA wherever they land if there doesn't continue to be a Department of Education. That's all I have on
Okay. All right, any follow-up questions? Of course, it was a lot to obtain, and honestly, some of the things from my standpoint, we're starting to implement, but there are also a lot of things that we need to get started on sooner rather than later. But I think we're on a really good, the agency is on a really good path towards this, and these are certainly obtainable goals. And my sentiments echo Andy saying, we just need to really keep this in the forefront and not just have them written down. If there aren't any questions.
Sandy has her hand
Oh,
up.
go ahead, Sandy.
Sorry, now I'm in a restaurant, so I'm sorry if it's loud. But I'm wondering whether or not, I mean, I've seen, and this is just anecdotal, but I've had several clients with DDA who have been referred to RSA, and the process has actually taken longer than had they just applied, without a sort of DDA sort of supposedly expedited referral process. So I just, and I don't know if something can be done when you had the objective of serving more people who get services from DDA. There is a real problem. Again, this is just anecdotal, but I mean, it's been 3 of my clients where like it literally went slower, and I just said, you just, for God's sakes, just go apply normally. It's taking months for the person to be found eligible.
So just for clarity, they're applying for DDA services first, or RSA?
No, they already
services?
have DDAs. These are people who are already on the rolls of DDA, and there'd be a meeting and they'll say, oh, they want supported employment or job placement or whatever it is. And then they'd be referred to RSA, but it is taking months and months for them to get approved for RSA services, longer than it would take if they just applied and did the 60 days.
So just so you're right, there's the goal in here about improving that. That's ridiculous, by the way. So, it is so frustrating to me because in like 2014, 15, we worked with DBH to improve our coordination, and we reduced the time frame there because we had the same issue with people being referred over to us. And then, we went through our whole process before we got back to them. We placed our counselors there, brought that time frame way down, and improved our outcomes tremendously. Since then, DBH has implemented a waiver for their part of the services, and it's causing some little hiccups for us. But what frustrated me was, how can we not have that same process when we're all in the same building? It has been my impression that over the last, it's actually been 2 years, that we actually last year saw really significant improvement in employment outcomes in the supported employment unit supporting people with DDA. And, one of our PCO groups is employment, I forget what it's called exactly, but we're rebooting that committee. It's going to be chaired by Ifeoma Woka, who is the supervisor of our supported employment unit. And FYI, Susan, she's going to be reaching out to someone at RCM to co-chair. And they're going to work on exactly this, not only the process for the initial eligibility and getting people into services, but also the coordination of waiver and VR services, so that we better kind of blend and braid the services, so that when you have people in employment readiness, you can also use VR, like customized employment, VR discovery, while you're using waiver employment readiness services, and figure out ways.
That would
Go
be
ahead.
great. I mean, I have one client, and I'm sorry, it's so loud. I have one client who RSA, they said we can't even submit the application because he doesn't have a state ID, and so therefore he can't get a job. And I said, well, you know, if only you guys found jobs that quickly. You know, I mean, like there's a process, and so they won't even accept the application until they address the fact that he doesn't have a state ID, which involves, you know, the mom finding his birth certificate and X, Y, and Z. But like, I mean, just like things like that that are stopping the process, that are just infuriating. And just other times it's just, you know, they want proof of SSI and they want proof of this. And I'm like, he's getting DDA services. You know, he's eligible. So anyway, just, yes, so any sort of streamlining and looking at that would be helpful. Because again, it's only 3 clients I've had recently, but it's all 3 of them I've had issues.
And Sandy, if you want to email me those names, I can also be willing to follow up on.
Sure.
You know, where
2
those
or
clients are
3
in
of
the
them,
process.
right. 2
Okay.
or 3 of them
Yeah,
are,
if
and
you
now it just took
shoot me
forever,
an
but I can give you the
email,
names. Yep.
And I'll figure out where they are, because what I noticed too is that when we have clients coming in, sometimes we don't, and this speaks specifically to the general unit, not EFOMA's unit, but when clients are applying for services, I don't think on our application yet, which we probably need to add, is if the client already has a DDA service coordinator. And so sometimes it comes into the general unit and our counselors here don't find out that until the last minute or until after they've been kind of digging and doing some research. But I also find that our general counselors don't know what the process is to make sure that the client is being connected, or that they're, I guess, connecting to more of the interdisciplinary team, as opposed to just contacting maybe the client. And sometimes our clients don't know the services that they receive. And so that they'll say, oh, we have a case manager. And we're like, well, you know, just trying to figure out what case manager means to them. So it could
You
be
know,
a
she
combination.
Yeah,
of
just so
things.
you know, that's not what's happening. This is to be a
Okay.
meeting.
It would have been faster.
These are being referred by
I
DDA
see.
directly.
Okay, okay, sorry, but I do know that that comes up too, and so I wrote down too that there may need to be in-service training for our counselors, when they do receive someone that does have a DDA service coordinator, but
And
if you'll
also for
send me those
DDA.
names, I'll follow up.
Because I'm assuming that if you're not turning people away who don't have a DC ID, like a official ID, and saying you can't even apply for services.
Absolutely
Not, and
not.
that, yeah, that.
Correct,
shouldn't
but I'm
happen.
telling
They
you,
may
I've had,
now.
I can tell you the client, I mean, the DDA service coordinator is the one saying we can't even have him apply for services. And I've been screaming and yelling about this, that you're supposed to be helping people with barrier anyway. So,
Okay.
do you know
I
who
know
I'm
what
talking
you're
about? His
talking
initials
about
are
there,
MW. His
And
initials are
you
MW.
are absolutely right. I know what you're talking about. And so, yeah.
Okay,
And this
thank
is like
you.
the ongoing effort to make that process more seamless, where they are potentially sort of waiting until the DDA service coordinator has compiled everything necessary to consider eligibility before they do the referral, which is not really
Correct.
okay, because if
Correct.
the person says, I want services, that's an application. We've been through this before in other units. But yeah, so anyway, that's the purpose of that work group within PCO, is to look at all those processes to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have, because we have to have better outcomes for people supported by DDA in terms of employment. It's still nowhere near where it needs to be. As I say, last year, it improved significantly. So there have been some really good changes in the employment outcomes. I think especially Ethiopia came from service coordination, and prior to that, she was a VR counselor. So she's been someone who's really brought both systems together better. But I think that committee that she'll be heading up in our PCO group will be able to address all these issues.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I will follow up with, as mentioned earlier, with the email referencing our committees. So the chairs will have a list of those or at least the members on those committees, and I will also share with you the responsibilities of the committee. Sandy?
Sandy,
Sorry, I know I'm annoying. Don't worry, I'm going to my DYRS hearing soon.
By the way,
But I just want
whatever
to,
cuts out background noise, so whatever noise you hear, we don't.
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's good. I'm outside the Wilson building. So the only other issue I wasn't sure if RSA, this wasn't state plan related, but was just planning to do anything, additional outreach or anything for the federal workers who may have lost their positions, whether it's Schedule A. I know certainly one Schedule A person who lost their, you may not all, probably all know who he is, but who lost his job, or just any other people with disabilities who, have been working the federal government and don't know about RSA. And I just wasn't sure if that was anything that you guys were doing additional outreach or anything like that, and any of the sort of state-related job fairs that, I know they have them in Maryland and DC that are occurring. Not expecting you to go to Maryland.
No, that's a good point, because DOES is doing it, so I should reach out to them to see how we can coordinate to make sure that we're working with folks who may have been folks with disabilities and
And
lost
I
their
know
job.
that for those that have recently obtained employment, my counselors in my unit specifically have continued to maintain contact with them. So we are in contact, I won't say with all of them, obviously, but we are in contact with the more recently, I would say maybe the last 6 months, or people's cases, or those whom we still have open. I know that Sylvia Bailey Charles has also been in contact with some individuals as well. So, and I did see, I guess, the news last night where Mayor Bowser had some remarks to give on that, and I guess that would, continuously be forthcoming. Definitely the news, it changes every day, so I don't think some of us have had a chance to kind of catch our breath on a lot of stuff. And so unfortunately, it's just kind of rolling with things, but definitely I'll make the note to reach out to DOES as well. Okay, if nothing else, I believe I don't have any other remarks, and Andy.
Director's reports. The next
Oh,
thing.
and I'm sorry, and I thought you were already given that. I don't have any other remarks, but then the director's report is the last thing on the agenda, and then following that, if there's any closing statements.
I just have two things. One is just to give people an update. We are still in the recruitment process for the deputy director position. Positions at that level require us to work along with the mayor's office, so there's kind of more steps to it than in filling other positions. People that were at the performance hearing would have heard, I am wanting to ensure that the person who takes that position is a VR professional who's a CRC, which I think that the last time that we had someone who was here for any period of time as the deputy director for RSA was in 2010. I'm blanking on his name right this minute, but he came here from Arkansas and was here when the agency first started. Next, I'm gonna, if I can get a list of the names of the committee chairs, I'm gonna reach out to each of the committee chairs. I'm going to, at our senior leadership meeting next week, I'm gonna ask that we identify a staff person to assist on each of the committees, so that we have a relevant staff person who can support that committee, and I'll connect that staff person to the committee chair for each of your committees. That was all I had.
All righty, any additional remarks or comments, questions, or concerns?
This is Allison White. Just a quick, I wanted to, I don't want to bring back the conversation about DDA, RSA eligibility. I know it's something that y'all are going to look into. But I did put a question in the chat because I thought that I remembered, and maybe this was years ago, that there was a standard operating procedure that said DDA, anyone in DDA was presumed eligible for RSA and could start services immediately. I don't know if that was, if I'm
That's not
imagining that.
true. So the only people who would be presumed eligible, which probably applies to everyone in DDA, is anyone receiving SSI or SSDI. So you may have heard, well, everyone in DDA is presumed eligible because everyone in DDA is eligible for SSI or SSDI. Almost everyone. Keeping in mind that DDA does support some people who are not legally eligible to work in the United States, and RSA can't support them. Even being presumptively eligible doesn't get you immediately into services. It just skips part of the steps. We do, though, have, if anyone wants to see it, there is a protocol on our website that walks through the processes for coordination between RSA and DDA.
And then from a supervisor standpoint, one thing that I've asked counselors to do is not to wait on, if we see a person or know that the person does receive Social Security disability benefits, I encourage them to go ahead and go through the process as soon as they have their award letter. Sometimes it can be difficult and there can be difficulty in obtaining the award letter. But if they have it, to go ahead and move forward with it. Given that too, we also still need to have the medical documentation provided. We just don't need it at the time of eligibility, but we do need to obtain it at some point throughout the process for our record keeping. So that's just something that we still need to continuously remind our counselors on, that they can go ahead and move forward with that, with determining eligibility.
Sure. So then another thought that I was having along the lines, Andy, of what you're saying about the plan having some really solid goals and identifying great outcomes that we want to see, and really needing it to be implemented, not just having a great plan in writing, but implementation of it. And I'm thinking about what role the SRC has in that, and wondering if there could be some kind of training or some way that SRC members do some training or awareness raising with VR counselors and service coordinators about what these outcomes are, so that everybody who's responsible for implementing it really understand what it says and understand how important it is to the community. So just wanted to throw out that idea.
I have to refresh my recollection about what the committees are, but it seems like one of the committees does have I remember thinking at the time, well, the performance people should be on that committee. Yeah. So I'm not sure, but like one of the committees should really be working with performance on, I think it was just customer service satisfaction though, right?
Yeah, and that's the Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy Committee. That kind of looks.
Isn't there one, because the role of the SRC really is to, one of the most important roles is to kind of, oversee the work of the VR program.
Yeah.
Do we have a committee that really looks at that?
I would say it's not definitive, meaning that it's not, put in writing as far as what the duties of the standing committees are. But I think that it could kind of flow. It says the policy planning and review, but I think it could either flow into that or the empowerment with looking at the satisfaction and the quality of RSA services that we are providing. So say, when I think quality, I think, are we providing quality, meaning are we in line with what our goals and priorities are?
It's almost like we need like a state plan committee Because we think of the state plan as something you do every 4 years as opposed to, I know like the DD Council has a state plan committee that monitors the implementation of the state plan. Right?
Yeah, I could
I
see that
think I
being,
should know.
yeah, that could be a good role for us to have some kind of state plan monitoring committee, some formal way that we make sure we're doing that. It might just be
Well, once-
renaming a committee. I don't know. I'm looking at consumer empowerment and advocacy, policy, media and public awareness, and nominating. I feel like maybe it could be included as part of a role of one of those. I'm not sure.
Which could be the consumer,
That's what I.
yeah. Because that one also has to work with performance anyway, because consumer satisfaction is something they do currently. So if they also look at kind of overall, how do we have, and then we can talk with them about how to do at SRC meetings, kind of an overview of progress on the goals, without it being as long as what I did today. But some kind of monitoring of our progress on the various goals. And our performance unit would be exactly the group that should do something like that. Riola has, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Riola.
Okay, thank you.
Karen.
This may not be a good question to ask because I'm still learning the process and I'm sort of navigating some disability things myself. But in your, Andy, I hate to take you all the way back, but goal 1 in the performance at 1.4, I was just wondering after that 90 days, and the client's case is closed, if they meet all of those performance objectives or and the goals are met. After the 90 days, if the client encounters a problem, do they start the process over, or is there an intervention process available to them?
Let me go back and see.
Sorry to take you back all the way.
You're talking about, you said under objective 1.4, was it?
It's under performance, under goal 1, 1.4 under the performance. It's number 4.
Oh, okay. So just so you know, and maybe we need to write it more clearly. People who receive supported employment services, who receive job coaching, when we begin providing job coaching to a person who's working, we have a plan for extended supported employment services. And extended services are those services that are provided after the VR case is closed. And we, in our supported employment policy, identify that a person transitions from RSA supported employment services over to extended services when they have achieved stability in employment, which is either they require supports less than 20% of the hours that they're working each week, or they have achieved maximum benefit and they're now at a plateau of the services that they will always require in order to maintain the job. At that point, they get referred over to the extended service provider. That's a 30-day notice kind of thing. We notify the extended service provider if it's DDA or if it's a DBH provider or if it's natural supports, whatever. We notify them. In 30 days, we will be ending VR services for you to begin the extended service. However, we don't close and our expectation is, so like when someone's in the waiver, is that they will have the time to put those services in place over the next 30 days. If they don't get the service in place, VR is still involved and stays involved until the extended service provider starts. Once they start, we're required to stay involved for 90 days while the extended service provider is providing services. So it's like 90 days of we're finished providing services, but we're checking to make sure this is okay. If they go 90 days with the extended service provider and everything's okay, then the case is closed. If we find that they need additional services, that's why we're still there. So we
Wow.
stay until they have had 90 days with the extended service provider and no need from anything from their DR counselor except a check-in.
Wow, awesome. Awesome.
I
Thank
just
you.
need to make sure that's written that clearly, but in one
That is
sentence.
great. That's great. I have a follow-up question for you. Is there an age limit for participants if they are still able to, even with the challenges they're working with? Is there an age limit that services are terminated?
Oh, no.
Okay, okay.
And
Okay,
then
great.
Susan,
Thank
you
you.
had a
Thank you.
question? Thank you.
Yeah, this is more of just a logistical statement as we're talking about additional meetings and committee meetings and sub meetings outside of this main meeting. I just wanted, not that anyone needs to change their schedule for me, but I have the privilege of now serving on grand jury duty every Wednesday through November. So I just wanted to throw that out to the group as we're, not that you need to do anything around my schedule, but as we're thinking about these future additional meetings, that my availability could be limited. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I know you understand.
I do. I did that like last summer for 5 weeks or something, or 6 weeks.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, 4 days a week.
Well, I'm lucky. Just one day. Well, I don't know. One day for 9 months, whatever that adds up to.
Federal grand jury, right?
Yeah, federal grand jury. Hmm.
Okay. If nothing else, we will leave it at that, and we'll see you guys at our next meeting.
Which is whichever, is it this, it's in May. And it's like is it May 8th?
I think it's May 1st.
It's May 8th.
8th?
Yes, the second Thursday in May. Oh, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I'm reading something else.
It's on my calendar as the 1st.
It is May Day, May 1st. Sorry, the first Thursday in May. Very sorry. May 1 is our next meeting, and it is on people's calendars. There's an invite out already.
All right, well, thank you. I hope everybody has a great weekend.